Continue. All right, you ready? All right, so welcome to the Yorktown Central School District Board of Education meeting for May 6, 2020. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence for our armed forces, those in our community who have lost loved ones, especially the brother of Barbara Loftus, and have a moment of reflection for those healthcare workers, first responders, and all essential personnel who are working tirelessly during the COVID-19 pandemic. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. We've called this special meeting for the purposes of a budget update based upon the governor's notice on Friday. So I'm going to turn this over to Ron.
Thank you,
You
Jackie.
open the meeting?
Hmm?
You didn't motion the opening of the meeting.
I did. I said, welcome to the Yorktown Central School District. We didn't have an exec session. We didn't have to open it. We're good.
Okay.
Right? I'm good. Right, Yvette?
I have motion to go to public session. No?
You don't need it if you're already there.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's staying well. So why did we call this meeting? As you may know, the governor announced on Friday that he was closing schools for the remainder of the school year. And with that came the decision to hold school budget elections and trustee vote on June 9th using a 100% absentee ballot system. So with an absentee ballot system, the timelines to meet the required deadlines become so confined. So on May 11th, which is this coming Monday, I will be giving my final budget presentation to the board. And in order for the board to meet the required timeline set forth in the governor's order, the board would also need to adopt the budget at that meeting. So it's appropriate for me to share some additional budget information with the board and with the community. And the only way really to accomplish that was by holding an additional meeting. So that meeting is this evening. So I just want to share with the board and with our community just a little bit about the absentee ballot system and what that entails as part of the governor's order. So the new election format requires school districts to mail a budget postcard to every home within the school district's catchment area. It's just under 7,100 addresses or so. We're required to then print a ballot for each of the nearly 15,000 registered voters in our school district catchment area. And we're actually going to be operating under the assumption after consultation with the Board of Elections that that number is going to increase. More people are going to register to vote. So 15,000 today may go up 16,000, 18,000 in the coming weeks. So we have to send out 15,000 registered ballots to the registered voters. We have to take those ballots, place them in an envelope, take that envelope and place it in another envelope that is postage marked, postage paid by the district with the return address to the district. And then we have to take that envelope and place it into a third envelope that also has to have postage paid by the district and then mailed to each of the registered voters. So when you think about this, it's the costs associated with complying with this mandate are astronomical. 15,000 envelopes times 3. So it's 15,000 number 9 envelopes, 15,000 number 10 envelopes, 15,000 number 11 envelopes, if those numbers hold, if anything, they're going to go up. And then printing 15,000 ballots. Then there are 2 separate bulk mailings that have to go out. So there's the postcard that I alluded to, but there's also the budget newsletter that has required information that has to go out to our community. We anticipate the cost of just the mailings and the absentee ballot piece. I'm not including the budget newsletter because we produce that every year, but the added costs are about $35,000. Now, there's no way that we can budget for this. We've been so responsible to our taxpayers, and it makes $35,000 additional dollars very difficult to bear. So we've saved some money on fuel oil. We've saved some money by not paying substitute teacher costs, not paying some of the third-party contractor costs, but we're anticipating using those monies to address the multi-million-dollar shortfall that we're anticipating resulting from a reduction in state aid, reduction in income from county sales tax, the lost revenue from returns on investments, from lost rents at French Hill and other lost revenues. With regard to the current status of the budget, I just want to put back in perspective that although it feels like we've been out of school for a really, really, really long time, of the 40-week school year, 28 of those weeks were in the school buildings. So the vast majority of our budget presentations were made through our traditional meetings, and the only meeting that was left, or the only presentation that was left, was my final budget presentation. So all of those meetings are posted to our website. All of those presentations are posted, so there will be access to those for anybody who wants to visit our website to just refresh their memories on what was presented at that time. So now we have had to really come back to our planning. The COVID circumstances came about, and we thought it appropriate to reprioritize our proposed budget to reflect, honestly, our new normal. And that's what a budget ultimately is. It's our prioritization of the most important needs, the needs of the students, obviously, being the most important, and using as few resources as possible. So in fact, in 2 of the last 4 years, we've been able to do that with a 0% increase to the levy. Some years it's not possible to do that. This year, the prioritization shifted from competing programmatic requests to really a focus on the health and safety of our students and staff for the reopening of schools. And we'll still make some programmatic adjustments, and I will speak to that a little bit later. But as I think fondly about the reopening of school, my team and I, all of us, all of our entire administrative team are thinking about the health and safety of our students. We're working through the plan daily, to be honest with you, our reopening plan. The governor has charged school districts with creating reopening plans, so we're working through that daily. But many of the items within the plan cost money, some more than others. The personal protective equipment, we have nurses' offices in each of our schools, obviously, and with 3,400 students and 500 staff members working in close quarters, illnesses are inevitable. And schools, unfortunately, are a location where the illnesses will spread quickly. So in our reopening, we have to make sure that we have ample masks. We have to make sure, and those masks, by the way, I have a price quote sitting on my desk, and they're about $6 a piece for the masks that we're looking at. That's a very big undertaking for a school district on a very fixed stream of revenue and a capped stream of revenue. But we need to make that happen. And that's where the reprioritization comes into play. We are also looking at gloves, some other specialty equipment for the nurse's office so that they're protected. Not to mention the infrared temperature thermometers that we're going to need for rapid temperature checks, hand sanitizer, disinfectant solutions. We went to a daily disinfection schedule, which I anticipate will be the expectation upon reopening, certainly for the immediate future of reopening. That solution is very costly. And as more and more districts move to those solutions, using the solutions, and many are using the equipment we're using, the cost just simply escalates. The demand outpaces the supply, and that's just a natural result, resulting in a cost increase. There are also facility upgrades that we have to make within the building. Schools are the hardest place to create a socially distant environment. They're not conducive to that type of environment. So it takes a Herculean effort to make that happen. And those measures do cost some money. We have a great facilities department. Dennis Verbois does a terrific job. His team does a terrific job, but he does need the resources to do that work. So with no flexibility within the tax cap, we really had to take a closer look at our budget to ensure that we were positioned to welcome students back when the time came. So in addition, we're making investments in student academic support. That's another really, really important component here. So Yorktown has one of the most powerful and robust remote learning plans in the region. I say that because I have a knowledge of the plans that are around. I'm really proud of what Yorktown was able to do. But we went into new learning during the first week of closure. So we reviewed for a couple of days that Thursday and Friday, and then we went right into new learning, which is something that not everyone is able to say. Our teachers were phenomenal. Our administrators were phenomenal. They took it in stride and did everything that they needed to support our students. We have a minimum of 3 live synchronous sessions for students with their teachers. But even with that model, we're going to need to offer our students additional support, honestly, as early as this summer, and certainly in the fall. Those supports all come with a cost, but they're the best investment that we can make right now to support our students. We also have to look at remote learning resources. We were thrust into this. I've said this before. We took a 100-year institution of learning that has existed in brick and mortar, face-to-face format, and we moved it to a digital platform in a matter of weeks. We're going to continue to improve, but if this is going to be some component of our new normal, and going to remote learning is going to be one of the options that the governor and the state will employ, we need to enhance our work in that area. So I just want to clarify, one of the questions is, well, why don't you start now? Do the upgrades now. The schools are empty. Go in and do the work now. So for our community, I understand the schools are empty, but the budget cycle runs on a July 1st to June 30th year. So come the spring, so we're planning now for our budget for next year. Come the spring, generally school districts have used their resources and they're winding down their budget season, their fiscal year, preparing for the next fiscal year. So I just do want to share that piece of it because that question has come up. The 2020-21 budget was difficult to prepare from the outset. We had rising benefit costs, which we have no input or control over. We have enrollment that's continuing to grow, especially in the early grades. Prior to the pandemic, the number of students who were attending private school went down by 33% from 5 years ago. So in a good economy, we went from 251 students 5 years ago attending private or parochial schools down to 168 students in the recent school year, most recent school year. And I imagine that in light of this pandemic, we will continue to see increased enrollment from private and parochial schools. I think that's going to be a natural byproduct. Also, the needs of our students are becoming increasingly more complex, and it's incumbent upon us as a public school to make sure that we meet those needs. So all of those things, home values remain high, they sell quickly, and of all these metrics, private school, enrollment growth, the new families moving into our community, it's a function of a high quality education that Yorktown's able to provide, and the evidence earn the outcomes. And I say this for our community. In 2019, Yorktown High School was a National Blue Ribbon School for Academic Excellence, and New York State Reward School for Excellence. Newsweek's top 500, top 5,000 schools for STEM in the country. We jumped over 100 places nationally on the U.S. News and World Report's America's Best High School rankings. And again, the rankings are what they are, but it's a common metric that is employed. And there are 24,000 plus high schools in the country. 14,400 get rated. And of those 14,400, we were just outside of the top 500 in the country, which is remarkable. It's 109 spots higher than where we were a year ago. So it's a tremendous, tremendous credit to Joe DeGennaro.
I think we had technical difficulties. Everybody's having internet issues. We'll give them a second to come back on.
Said, see ya.
Yeah.
It must have been something I said. Was it something I said?
That's your optimum.
We cut you off.
It must have been something I said, so I'll stop saying it. I don't know where we left off, but I just wanted to share that good things are happening, wonderful things are happening. It's a testament to all of our administrators. I was just sharing some of the high school's accomplishments. It's a testament to Joe DeGennaro High School principal, his team, faculty and staff there, of course, the students as well, and certainly Mrs. O'Shea, who leads our instructional program. With all that said, I will be proposing to the Board of Education Monday evening a budget-to-budget and tax levy increase that will equate to an estimated 1.15% tax rate increase in the town of Yorktown. The proposed levy is tax cap compliant, and it will be below the 2%. So I just want to share that with you. The proposed budget that I will be delivering to the board Monday evening will equate to an estimated tax rate increase of 1.15%. It is tax cap compliant, and it is below the 2%. Now, there are some programmatic changes that come with this. Outside of some of the enhancements, we're also looking at some security enhancements. We've been talking about some security enhancements. We're looking to continue that. That's important. We're also looking to expand on our engineering program. That's been really, really important for us. It's been a really, really successful program. And as you think about the time, and it's important that we continue to invest in the sciences. It's important that we continue to look at some of the online learning opportunities. Those are all things that we're working toward. We're looking at adding and reimagining student supports, academic and behavioral support, so that more students can access the learning. And we're looking at reimagining some of the supports that we offer to just better align with our Ycsd vision, not necessarily budgetary impact, but just good practice to help us move toward our goals. And what are our goals? It's the high student output and continuing to build on the high student output that we've seen. So before I close, I just want to thank Tom Cole and his team, because this budget season is just such an enormous lift. And this budget was especially challenging. And Tom, I'm going to ask you to say a few words in a moment, but this was especially challenging because we're moving along with our budget development. We're 90% down the road. It's a challenging budget, so it's already a difficult time. And then the pandemic comes and we have to shift our thinking on, gee, we have limited funds. How can we repurpose those funds to make sure that we can provide for the health and safety of our students first and foremost? There are parents who are going to be entrusting their children to us whenever the schools do reopen. It's looking like it's September at this point because the governor's closed them for the rest of the year. But to pivot so quickly, so late in the process, and to now have to orchestrate, and Yvette's done a remarkable job of trying to piece together this new governor's order and 15,000 ballots and 45,000 envelopes and 2 different bulk mailings in addition to that. This has been some lift. Tom, my hat's off to you and your team. You've done a remarkable job. I'll turn it over to you if you want to add something maybe that I left out.
Thanks, Dr. Hatter. I'm typically the face of these things, but we have a very talented team of people in our business office that supports this endeavor. And once again, they've done a wonderful job. And the thing that I would like everyone to understand is that we've done everything we possibly can, we believe, to react to what we know. But there are still some things that we don't know, and still some challenges ahead that could rear themselves in the upcoming year, specifically potential mid-year cuts of revenue from the state in the middle of the next school year. We're poised to be able to react to that as best we can, but that is still a variable that's out there and one that we're watching on the horizon very closely. But for everybody involved in this process, I want to thank them for their time and their effort. There were at least 3 iterations of this budget. One that was the standard budget, one that was amidst the pandemic, and then post-pandemic results. and quite an effort on everybody's part. And I thank everyone for their patience and their professionalism in trying to put this document together that represents both a responsible and realistic view for our public to take a look at.
Mike, we had, well, Ron had the Fiscal Advisory Committee convened to talk about some of these issues. Mike, can you talk about some of the things that were discussed so that everybody's aware?
Yeah, I definitely will. Can I ask a question first, though? Ron, can you explain why we have 3 envelopes that have to go out? It seems like that's an extra envelope for some reason.
So the ballot itself, and that's what I thought. I thought you needed 2 envelopes, but apparently you need 3 because the ballot itself is sealed. So we place that ballot, again, the voter will seal that ballot. We place the ballot in an envelope. That envelope goes in the envelope that the voter will send back to us so that when we open that envelope, we're pulling out a sealed ballot.
Right.
That is sealed in an envelope. And then, so the ballot is in an envelope. That envelope is in the envelope that is going to ultimately get mailed back to us. And then we have to take that envelope, put it into another envelope to send it to the voter.
So that when we get the envelope back, there's another envelope inside.
Correct.
So that whoever's opening
ballot.
Those envelopes doesn't see the ballot.
Exactly.
They would have to open, yes, correct. They would have to unseal the
Right.
ballot upon.
Well, somebody's going to do that anyway, no?
Yeah, but you're going to throw out the one envelope. You're going to have the sealed envelopes. It's going to help keep your vote anonymous is the goal of that, I'm assuming.
Well, at some point, somebody has to read it, so it's not anonymous.
But you don't sign the ballot. So once you separate the sealed ballot envelope from the envelope that came and returned in,
So we shuffle it like Vegas, and then we
You
don't know
got
which
it.
envelope it came out of. I got you.
Who's
Okay.
gonna open the envelopes?
You.
We're working on a team to do that. There have to be multiple people to be available just to ensure the integrity of the process. So Yvette as district clerk will certainly lead that effort, but there will be additional people in the room. When you think about the volume of ballots in and of itself, that would require multiple people to take part, but also to ensure the integrity of the election. And Yvette's a high integrity person, but we would certainly want to have additional people in the room with her.
That's
So
challenging. You'll need them separated, the people, and open the envelopes. So that's so challenging.
Mike, you were
A lot
going
of
to
work.
give a fiscal
Yeah,
advisory.
sorry about that. I was, thank you. So, when all of this began and it looked like there were going to be dramatic changes to the revenue side of the equation, one of the things that we decided to do was to hold a fiscal advisory committee meeting to discuss ways to handle it. And one of the things that we discussed at the last meeting in particular was, how do we handle the state aid and revenue cuts that would undoubtedly result from this economic shutdown without destroying all of the tremendous educational progress that we've made over the last, 5+ years. And we recognize that this is likely a multi-year problem, and we really don't have enough information from SED and the governor right now to fully assess the impact. Nobody knows what that's going to look like. And the last thing that we want to do is to begin cutting people and programs right away, because those are very impactful and they're very difficult to bring back easily. So what we are proposing are some prudent reductions to the budget for this year. We want to stay well under the tax cap, but it will likely result in, as Ron mentioned, a small tax increase, but again, well under the tax cap. However, and I think this is important for everybody to recognize, if the budget as proposed does not pass, we would then be forced to implement a contingency budget, which is going to involve, significant cuts to people and programs. And so it's critically important that everyone in the community understands we are doing the best that we can with the changes that were given to us. But if the budget doesn't get passed by the community, we're looking at a significant reduction in a lot of the things that we've come to appreciate about the Yorktown School District and the experiences that our children, are afforded. So I just wanted to kind of give some positioning around what the board has been directing as far as, to the administration so that the public understands where we're headed and why.
And Mike, if I may, I just want to say, as chair of fiscal advisory, your leadership in that committee has been absolutely remarkable. You're so fiscally responsible to the taxpayers, but you understand that our students need a really solid education to be those change agents of our future, to be positioned well, to have so many different choices at the end of their high school career. So I really appreciate the leadership that you've shown and the work that you have done in chairing the Fiscal Advisory Committee. And Anthony and Jackie are both on that committee. This was not an easy budget for us to develop. So your thoughts and your input and your guidance were paramount. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I agree with you as far as Anthony and Jackie. Really what we do is, as any subcommittee of the board, we give direction for the board and come back to the entire group and explain what we're thinking and get feedback. But it has been a very challenging year. Yes. Thank you.
At
Anthony,
this point,
did you want to add anything? Because you were on that meeting too.
Can I ask you a question, Jackie?
Yep.
Yeah, so, and I just wanted to say, Mike is a great leader on the Fiscal Advisory Committee, and Jackie, you're great. And I want to thank the board for letting us go out there and speak for you, because it was a difficult year. And just thinking, if the budget doesn't pass, the impact it would do on our school. Dr. Hatter, I mean, is it like, it'll be tremendous.
It would be tremendous. I'll start and then I'll ask Tom to finish. Right. We already have a revenue problem. We already have a shortfall in revenue. It's the reduced state aid, it's the reduced county sales tax, it's a reduced French from French Hill, reduced return on investments. So we have a revenue problem here. And then when you add if the budget is defeated, and I pray that it's not, I really pray that it's not, because it would set us back substantially as a school district. We are looking at a multi-million-dollar shortfall. So there's the revenue issue, and then there's an additional nearly 2 million, a little over 1.5 million that we would have to reduce. That now, we've tried to stay away from impacting programs in our budget reductions. I mean, in 2 of the last 4 years, when you do the math, there's a 0% increase on the levy. In fact, in the last 5 years or so, in the aggregate, it's been a 1.1% increase on the levy. This board has done a remarkable job of putting together fiscally responsible budgets that also get the students the programs they need. I know of no other district that has that kind of track record for such modest increases with such dramatic growth in programs. So that is remarkable. So we're lean as it is, because we've been very sensitive to the taxpayers, and now having the budget defeated, we're looking at a multi-million-dollar shortfall. Now we're impacting programs, we're reducing the workforce, we're reducing programs. There are going to be a lot of things that are going to have to be discussed. Class sizes most certainly will go up.
Yep.
Some of the wonderful offerings that we've added in engineering and some of the other courses, those would likely not be able to come to fruition. In fact, we may have to reduce some of the offerings that we have across the board. We'd have to look at our co-curriculars. We'd have to look at athletics. We'd have to look at the fine and performing arts. When you're facing such a multi-million-dollar shortfall, honestly, everything becomes a subject of conversation. So Tom, I'll ask you to just add on to those remarks.
Sure. So at this point, from this point in the budget process, a contingency budget would mean that we'd have to cut at least $1.5 million more from the budget. We're already using $3.5 million of cash reserves to plug the revenue hole that's been created by reduced state aid, lost revenues from county sales tax, French Hill rents, and investment returns. So that 3.5, on top of that 3.5, we'd have to cut another $1.5 million. Given that already in this budget, we have stripped out everything that is not core related. And by that, I mean, we have stripped down fuel costs based on declining commodity prices. We've stripped out all contingencies for utility price fluctuations. We've reduced materials and supplies by 5% across the board. So in a contingent environment, there would be no way that we could avoid tremendous impact and reductions to curriculum-related items.
Okay.
And basically, you say curriculum-related items, we're talking personnel at that point.
Mostly personnel, and yes, in a business like ours, which is service-related, 75 cents on every dollar that is spent is in some shape or form in terms of salary, benefits, or support related to personnel.
Not to mention our current transportation situation is in flux as well. We don't know what those costs may look like.
So is
And
it,
we don't know what the governor's final budget is going to be, which isn't coming out till maybe next week.
But yeah, the 15th was that first inflection point that the state budget director gave to school districts. So we'll know more on the 15th, but again, there are still 2 other checkpoints in the budget development process at the state level that will further shape our outlook. Peter, were you going to add something?
I just wanted to ask a question. So is it the feeling of the committee that the community is not going to accept a 1.15 increase?
I think it's more the feeling of the committee is that this is about as bare bones as we can get without hurting our core values and programmatically and our staff. And we don't know what's going to happen in this budget climate, in this financial climate, in all these other issues. So that's the issue.
Pete, what I would say is that historically, I think the committee and the board would believe that we would have no issue with our budget the way we originally intended it to be presented. The way the timeline is working, the unknown variables, the fact that it's all being done by absentee ballot and nobody has to come to the polls, that all throws, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, into the mix, right? So we really have less of a feel now than we normally would. And I think the thought in the region and around the state is that, you know, when you look at all the registered voters versus who would normally be voting, it's a big difference. And so having to do it this way definitely makes the bar a lot higher.
Do we have a sense, or Ron, have you talked to any of the surrounding superintendents about where they think they're going to come at? Are we consistent to like surrounding towns?
Yeah. So there are, and this will be great for the viewing audience as well to kind of get this sense. And also when we post it to our website. So it may be obsolete by the time it goes to the websites as districts go through this process and refine their budgets even further. But my understanding as of last check is that there are districts, and every district is in its own unique set of circumstances and situations. There are some that will come out with no increase, maybe one that will come out with no increase. And then there are some that are looking at increases of over 5%, over 6%, I think was the last, and everything in between. So I think we're certainly on the lower end of all of our surrounding communities. We're most certainly on the lower end with regard to the tax rate increase, but I think it's a mixed bag across the region.
I mean, the only reason I asked is I saw Lakeland's last night and it was 0.75.
0.75, okay.
And it's like a budget to budget decrease of like 5.5% or something, but as a point of reference, I was just wondering, not that that means all that much to me, but just.
Yeah, and every district has their, like I said, every district will have their own unique circumstances. They have different bases to build on. So a 5.5% change on a budget that is 1.5 times or double ours is quite different when it comes to where each percentage for us, it means so much to our core because our base is a little lower.
But public perception, the majority of the public don't get that.
Sure.
Yeah, so, but no, I was just wondering on it. So no, but Mike, you make a good point on the voting public. Yeah, there's a lot more people who can vote this way and will.
Yep.
I have a question. Maybe it's for Tom. So we don't know yet what the governor is going to do in terms of our funding. What happens if on the 15th or the 30th or June or July or even mid-year next year, it's drastically cut? Are we prepared to deal with that? I mean, I'm sure, knowing you, Tom, that you have this all anticipated, that we're going to be in a worst case scenario. What happens if we approve this budget at 1.15 and worst case scenario comes out? What do we do then?
So it's an excellent question, and this is we posed this to the Financial Advisory Committee, and this was the essential question of most of the discussion that we had. How do we approach such a scenario? So what we decided at that time, and this is after we had preliminary discussions with our external auditors, and I had a series of discussions with my colleagues from around the region, and was taking the temperature of just about every approach. And this is what we decided upon. Because the last quarter of this year, we didn't have some third-party contractual costs and some of the normal costs that we would anticipate in a normal session, substitute teacher costs and so forth. We decided to build our cash position to the greatest extent possible. And by that, we mean funding our cash reserves to the highest level we possibly can. And we think we've been able to do that to a large extent. So we think that right now, if the governor cuts our aid anywhere from $3 to $5 million in the middle of next year, which is somewhere between a 20 and 40% cut, we think we can handle that next year with additional revenue to plug the hole that would be created. In other words, we'd run an operational deficit next year and fill that deficit with additional revenue from monies we did not spend in the current 1920 school year. That's a remedy for 1 year. Our concern beyond that, quite frankly, is what happens in the subsequent budget year. Does state aid rebound? Does it stay at lower levels? Does the economy produce revenues in the forms of sales tax and so forth that we've been accustomed to? But that's a discussion for about 12 months from now. But we are already preparing for that, different kinds of scenarios. And as Mike Mignani indicated, the wild card out there that we continue to watch, and we believe we have a plan, a couple of approaches for this, is our transportation provider. So the long-winded answer is that we are every day trying to look at the horizon, Lisa, to see what next threat is over there. And we're trying to put a plan together to deal with the potential inevitable clouds that start to form on that horizon.
And just to follow up on that, if the immediate question is, well, could you have used some of those monies that were saved for this year? The answer to that is yes, we did. We're looking at this as a multi-year shortfall because this problem, there's always a lag with the state aid piece. So this problem will carry into the 2021-2022 school year. So we just have to be forward thinking to imagine that this problem will continue for schools, at least, not just for the coming fiscal year, but for the following. So what we did was we did use additional monies. We're using over $3 million to help with next year's tax burden. So that's how we were able to get to that 1.15. Otherwise, it would have scaled up. I can't tell you exactly because it's a sliding scale depending on how much money you contribute to that. But we also know that if we don't have some for the if we don't have funds ready for the 21-22 school year, and we get that mid-year cut or we get that further reduction, we're really in a vulnerable position 2 years out. So Tom being as gifted as he is, and Mike really having a solid understanding of school finances, we decided to come at this with a 2-year plan.
I think when we talked about it, we talked about 2 years, but we actually did look even further down the road. I think Mike and Anthony wanted us to look further down the road so that we weren't going to be caught up. This is not going to go away in 21-22, we don't think. So if we don't plan multi-year and we just go year to year, we're going to be in a bind next year as well. And I think that's where Mike was really good with helping us.
Well, what happens, you got to recognize the dominoes that come into play. So as a result of what's going on now, in all likelihood, the contributions we'll have to make in the future to pension plans like ERS and TRS are going to go up because of the investment performance now. Because of the medical issues that we're seeing, in all likelihood, you're going to have an increase in your contributions for healthcare costs. So, this isn't going to go away anytime soon. And so we've got to look at it, as I said earlier, on a multi-year level to be as prepared as we can. Unfortunately, as everybody knows, things happen quickly, and there's always going to be something new around the corner. So we're doing as best as we can with it, as Tom mentioned. Him and his team have done an outstanding job of really laying out potential scenarios and what would we do in those cases. But there's a lot of them.
So Monday night, you're going to present the budget, and you're going to present where we left off before
Yes.
our last
Well-
meeting, and then where we are now, and how you've gotten there.
Yes, that is the ultimate plan. Much of what I said this evening will be repeated. In addition to celebrating tenure, my hope is that we'll have an audience to hear the budget presentation in addition to those who are on for the tenure call. So I will be repeating much of what I said, as well as providing a more formal presentation to the board and to the community with my proposed budget to the board.
Okay. I just want the community to understand that we're, based upon the timeline, we as all boards are expected to adopt the budget before the state has come out with their final numbers, which is very difficult because you don't really know what the state's going to contribute for you right now. So I really appreciate everything that you guys have done, because you're really just kind of shooting in the dark here and using your best estimates as to what can and can't happen. And we don't know, based upon daily briefings, what's going to happen. They change all the time on us.
And if there are no other questions, then that concludes my report. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Okay. Did you want to say anything about the bus situation as long as we're on camera?
Sure. I'm happy to give you the update that I have, which isn't much of an update. We've heard news stories. We have not had a formal letter from Bauman indicating their intent to go either file for bankruptcy or to withdraw and no longer service our account. We have not had formal confirmation from the Bauman Bus Company at this time. Now, in reading the tea leaves, they operate over 30 school districts, and the vast majority, I think all but 2, I think 32 out of 34, have not remitted payment to them. So I understand the circumstances. So in reading the tea leaves, there's a likelihood that they will not be servicing our account. I think that's more the probability than the possibility. So no, we haven't, but I do want to be clear, we have not received a formal letter from Bauman indicating that they will no longer be servicing our account at this time. But we are being proactive. We're looking forward. We're trying to work with their side as best we can to understand the facts. I'm just looking for what the facts are. I'm not necessarily looking for the speculation part of this, but we will be prepared. There are other transportation vendors. We have a good contract. We have a contract that I believe is very good for the district. So we'll be in a good position to shop other vendors in the area. There are dozens of bus companies.
But if they've filed Chapter 11 or Chapter,
I don't know of that one.
That's public information. Wouldn't it be out? Couldn't it track that down?
That's not available. We haven't been able to find a formal filing.
Okay, which means that they haven't yet, more than likely.
And I don't know if it's a function of the courts just not being open at this point, or is it some other mechanism that they're looking to exercise, and maybe it's a sale of the company, maybe it's a sale of the contracts, or a leasing of the contracts, or an assignment of the contracts. I don't know what the formal mechanism is, so that's why I won't speculate on it. There is a possibility, my hope is that we're able to take the contract and assign it to another vendor. That is honestly what that's what our thinking is.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions on it? No? All right. We have to do a little bit of business. We have to approve the legal notice to go into the paper. So be resolved that the Board of Education approves a legal notice and resolution establishing June 9, 2020 as the annual district meeting and election notice of petitions and public hearing. It's a notice of annual meeting, and budget vote and registration of voters is listed below. Anybody can read it on the agenda. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. If there's no other business, can I ask that we adjourn to go into executive session where the matters pertaining to the employment history of particular individuals, contractual natures, with no intent to return to the public session?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Anthony, we're going to an exec session.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay.